Well, welcome. Today, Lauren, Christine, and I are going to be talking about sun transits 22 and 36. So we'll be exploring around, seeing what we can learn, and then what we can play with over the next two periods of 5.5 days. So see what's happening, Christine, what's coming?
Yeah. So we're recording in the one brief reprieve from all this emotionality in we're currently in gate 63, which is a head gate. So maybe this will be a very cerebral walk through the emotional solar plexus today. But I certainly have felt it myself. It has felt a little like less intense and less buzzy. I feel like a lot of this emotional energy has been very buzzy. In part because I don't normally have emotional definition and I don't carry many emotional gates. And so I think personally I feel like I feel those things more. I know Lauren has said that she seems to feel things that she carries more when they're doubled down essentially in the transit. We all get to play around and figure out our own relationship there to the energies of the heavens. But we will be on March 7th, we'll be walking into the sun will be moving into gate 22, which is yet another emotional gate. 22 and 36 are the two gates that we're talking about today. Both of those represent the last two of the emotional gates that the sun will be wandering through. And so just a little heads up that this emotionality continues, but will be ending right around the spring equinox. So there should be some relief there for us all. And also, the rest of the astrology is cuckoo bananas right now. Like it is just off the charts weird. So it's not just the sun that's probably, pushing down on you. It's a lot of things. Um, but in gate 22 on the 7th, gate 22 is the gate of openness. And this is an energy to be social or not. And you may see this with people who have this energy. There is this real moodiness around whether or not they want to be in conversation, in relationship, in touch with other people in certain times, right? Depending on their own emotional wave, essentially, or emotional moment in their process. And so gate 22 is the design of a social being, right? And this is where much of our emotional energy is is expressed in the world. So both gate 22 and gate 36 are on the side of the solar plexus connected directly to the throat. So these gates can actually be more emotionally expressive than some of the other gates that we've actually been talking about in this period. And so that's something I would kind of pay attention to in this time period. Like, are you seeing more like the in human design, this gate often gets called the verbal gunslinger because this can be somebody who is not cautious in how they speak and is not or is speaking in a way that is out of their moodiness and not out of their true like what they really think, right? They're just kind of taking the moment, feeling in the moment and just saying whatever feels good. So there can be that kind of energy, so I would watch for that. But it also carries this really beautiful energy in this socialness of this energy. It carries the power to empower attentiveness in others. And so that's the other thing I'm gonna try to be tracking a little bit in this time period. Like, what are we being attentive to, right? And I think that there's so many things in the world right now that are just clawing for our attention. I think it might be interesting to see what things really um, that really call to you in this time, what is really being asked for you to pay attention to, because I think there's probably something there for us. So that's a little bit about 22.
I have 22 in my design, so as I'm listening about this, like sort of just saying whatever's the gunslinger part, and I went, I kind of like that. But the but this in this paying attention to what's happening for us and what's happening around us, it strikes me that paying attention to the what we're doing and thinking and what impact that has on the world is it. I mean, that's the one thing we have some control over is because we have no control over what's happening out there for sure. But it's just like what are my thoughts doing? I know in Reiki, we talk about having protective um, uh, areas around us where, um, like, I can be feeling something, but I have this intention that it's not going to go beyond the sort of semi-permeable membrane around me. So if I'm thinking something harsh towards someone else, it gets sort of slowed down, and then the intention is for it to release without doing any harm. And also that if there are any harsh thoughts coming towards me, that they'll bounce off. And so there's it just struck me when I was reading Richard Rudd about this, that it really connects with that idea in Reiki about not not doing anything harmful, not even with my thoughts.
Not doing harm sounds really good these days, doesn't it? I think that would be a wonderful thing to um, just hold and contemplate for this time period. I'm thinking a lot about this word grace, and it shows up in the I Ching hexagram for 22 is grace, but then in the gene keys, it's the gift in the city, right? Graciousness and grace. And I'm thinking back to a couple years ago, and I would do these recordings with a mentor of mine, Jyoti Wind. And one of the recordings was about what is grace. And um, I'm always so touched by her definition of grace. And growing up Catholic, I always thought I could make grace, right? Like I could create it, like you would a recipe and make something, and I have grace. And Jyoti was like, no, grace is when you are fully in your essence, and then it comes to you. And so I'm thinking about what you're saying, Lois, and this not wishing harm, and being fully present in yourself, yet not, but protected at the same time. And it makes me think of what a moment of grace would feel like. I think that's something I'm going to carry with me during the week as I think of this particular energy.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, in the gene keys, this is one of the longest gene keys. It's got all kinds of stuff going on in it. But one thing he talks about a lot is accountability, right? And so from a human design perspective, this is an individual energy, right? This is an individual knowing energy that all individual energies are mutative. So some of what you were talking about, Lois, is this idea that we are, these energies are constantly mutating others, whether we want them to or not, right? And so in this, in this state of grace, this is something we don't extend to ourselves or others as often as we should, right? And so, and in part because when we are working from a space, a space of grace and graciousness, we there's just so much more potential for good things to come out of that as opposed to harmful things, right? And when you're in an energy that is going to make change no matter what, boy, it's great to be in an energy where, better to be in a space where you might, with a potential change is so much more likely to be good than bad, right? And again, this thing about extending grace to ourselves, I think is really something that is very difficult for a lot of people, right? And we cannot be kind to others. We cannot be, you know, good to others if we are not good to ourselves first. And this does not mean do not hold ourselves accountable, right? He talks about this a lot. Richard talks about this a lot in 22, like accountability, being honest with ourselves about our own failures, our own shadows, our own problems, right? Is key to us being graceful in the world in many ways, right? We have to reckon with those things and expect that we are all fallible, right? This is the human thing, right? We accept it in ourselves, we do what we can to rectify it and not cause harm as much as possible, and then we extend ourselves grace beyond that, right?
And I was thinking too, what you were saying about with Jody, I've looked at grace as something that we allow more than we could create.
Mhm. Exactly.
It's like if I'm being the best person I can be, I can make space for grace. And it got me thinking about something I ran across years ago in university is we've been talking a lot over the last few sessions about evolution, like the evolutionary push, and that a lot of the things that are happening are really important for what happens evolutionary wise, but they're not so great for lots of the people that sort of have to deal with it. And sort of connecting this gate 22 with gate 55 in that way. So those gates have been about the evolutionary push, and gate 22 is about the involutionary push. And it took me back to Hegel's work on spirituality, and that the idea that everything is a manifestation of spirit, and spirit experiences itself through all of the experiences of everything. And I was thinking, but those two energies are coming together to meet each other. So you have the evolutionary push that we have an active piece in, but there's this involutionary presence that's coming down to meet. And I think it's a really beautiful idea, but it's like this one gate is so different from the others in that way.
Picking up on your word allow, and I think that that's what happens is we allow grace to come to us. And so and to allow, we have to be as fully in our essence as possible and connected. And the Gemmo that I had seen would be useful for this last year was field maple. And I would agree that that's still a very good extract to consider, because what field maple does is allow us to accept all the parts of ourselves and to extend that sweetness and kindness, so then therefore we can extend it to others, which is exactly what we're talking about here, is allowing and making space for all, and then being able to offer it to others. And it's interesting because field maple on a physical level works on the flow flute between the gallbladder and the liver, and creating a fluidity there. And I see that very similar to what we're talking about here, is allowing this to come through us so it can move out into the world. And if just a few of us could do that, it might make a difference.
Yeah, both of what you're talking about is talked about in human design as like this emotional solar plexus is actually going through an evolution. Humanity is going through an evolution through this emotional solar plexus, right? And we are becoming more um so essentially what's going on is like the spleen is our instinct and our basic like human animalistic space. That evolution happened thousands of years ago. We worked through that, and then we went up to the ajna in the head, and we have these big brains, and we kind of sort of worked through that, but we haven't actually as a species worked through this emotional aspect of ourselves, right? An ability to connect emotionally both to ourselves and to the other. And that's what's going on in the world right now, which, I mean, hello, can you see it? It's everywhere. But again, it's longer probably than our lifetime. But what you're talking about is actually, I think, part of what's going on here. Like this emotional solar plexus is mutating in the human species. And we are at in the crux of it, in the midst of it. And so we are all experiencing this knowing and not knowing at the same time, right? This pull between us where we're just like, We don't know who we are. We have these higher selves that we never, we never managed to meet, and then we have this animalistic thing that we seem to be hung out in. So there's this process that I think is really interesting to hear you both talk about it, because I think that's what we're seeing here. And again, like this 22, you're right, Lois, has a huge role to play in that, to the point where I don't totally understand it. But it is about this ability to express emotion in the world and to connect to the spirit. You're right. Like this is 100% true. This gate 55, the spirit of the effervescence of humanity, essentially, right? And so it's super fascinating to me. Now, I don't think we'll experience all of that between March 7th and 12th. You may get a little taste of it here and there. And then on the 12th, we'll move into gate 36. Well, on the 13th, sorry. There's the 13th to the 18th, we're in gate 36, which is also our final emotional gate. It literally sits right next to 22 in the body graph, which is unusual. We don't usually have gates, in the mandala sitting, right next to each other in the body graph. It just works out that way for this one. But gate 36 is called the gate of crisis. And most people don't like the name of that. And that's probably not a bad idea, because there can be a lot of crises showing up in this energy. And crisis is not like, we always think about big things about crisis, but essentially what gate 36 is looking for is new experiences, right? This is the experiential side of our body graph. It's seeking new experiences in order to grow and learn and evolve. And one of the things that happens in new experiences is you don't know. And when you don't know, there are tiny little crises that happen, right? Sometimes they're just tiny, small things, you don't even think of them. But sometimes they're big, and that's the word crisis we usually think about. But the idea of like a not knowing space and what that brings up for you is the crisis, right? And it is also true that these folks who carry this energy can find themselves constantly in crises of one form or fashion or another, right? So it is possible that this time, 5 days or so, that stuff could show up in your life. It is part of this new experiential way where we're working on as a collective. And this is a collective energy. And I think the other thing that's interesting about to just bring up about these two gates in particular is gate 22 is in the stream of emoting, right? So it's about expressing energy or emotional energy, and gate 36 is in the stream of feeling, right? And so it's much more, I think, about this feeling energy. It is also expressive, but it is also this personal experience of like, what's going on for me? And the 22 is much more like, I don't care what's going on. This is what I want to, this is what I'm feeling. I'm just going to tell you, right? So I think it might be interesting to play with that in these two gates too, to just notice if you see a quality difference in the emotion that you're either emoting or feeling.
I think too with that is like the real just, it's like, so how am I? Am I reacting or am I responding to what's happened? So it's like, is the reaction sort of comes before discernment, responding comes after some discernment. So I mean, like, are you taking a breath and saying, does this reaction make sense in this moment? Because there's like the power of our emotions is something that can be really, really destructive, but it can also be hugely allowing for amazing things to happen, depending on how you work with it. So again, more allowing. That word keeps coming out of my mouth here today.
Yeah, I think this is about allowing, and we're experiencing. We want something else, and so we're pushing against. And I'm actually looking forward to this period. Of course, I have this gate, and I love a good crisis. Um, Not people around me don't always love the crises I tend to create, just out of experimenting, but it's just part, it's all about perspective, isn't it? I mean, all these are, but this one I think in particular, because I mean, this is what we keep hearing from people, we're in a crisis, we're in a crisis. And, but are we, right? Are we, or are we growing and changing? And this is what growth and change looks like. And this discomfort we have is because we're trying to keep clinging to how we want things to be. I think it will be an interesting time to arrive in this gate coming out of 22 and really checking in and seeing how resourced you are. And I think how resourced you are and how you're willing to care for yourself through these 5 days, I think will impact your experience greatly.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think also, like, this is also another one of those beginning ending points of the wheel. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about wheels, right? There's all kinds of those places. But in this case, gate 36 is the final gate before what in astrology is seen as the beginning of a new cycle, which is the spring equinox, right? And so 36 does have some culmination energy too, which I feel like I'm feeling that right now. Even though everything seems chaotic, it seems chaotic in a way that I'm like, ooh, this is like the end time of chaotic. Like this is something's coming here, right? And so, I'm not saying it's all going to be sweetness and light afterwards, but there does seem to be that energy. So yeah, I would just play around with that too. Are you noticing some sort of like maybe some crises are actually coming to an end, right? Maybe there's some new light coming in from this, Aries energy that's initiating new things in a way that's, closing down.
When I was looking at the I Ching rendition that I have, it was referred to as clouded consciousness, and like that ability to not be able to see. And then that got connected to like the emotions that we have, like our shadow aspects of ourselves, and how when we don't pay attention to that, negative things happen for us, like illnesses or um, things that we don't want to have happen, or we say things that we really didn't want to say. We get diseases and that sort of thing, and so this sort of and Richard Rudd talks about the dark night as the soul aspect of this, and I think that goes back to the not knowing that you were talking about, Christine, because that uncertainty and not knowing creates a lot of discomfort for us. So being with that discomfort rather than running away from it during this period of time makes a lot of sense to me.
We've got this Mercury and Mars conjunction right in this. And I mean, that in itself is a crisis creator and a time where people are often, there's a conflict. You say something, and I think you mentioned that, Lois, words will be said, but maybe they're supposed to be said, right? And there's this point that we want everything to look nice and smooth and pretty all the time, and we know that's not how reality is, and so we are going to have these things that clash, and then we step away and we learn and then we move. And so I think it's important folks are aware this can show up in a lot of different ways, but that astrological aspect, I think, really adds to this energy of this crisis. I'm going to throw out two Gemmos, and I think it depends how you're coming into this. And so the first one is Dog Rose. This is what I had suggested last time, last year when we moved through gate 36. And Dog Rose really addresses the question, one of the questions that comes out of the I Ching is, how are you safeguarding this inner light, this very private part of yourself. How do you safeguard it? And Dog Rose is all about supporting fragility and helping you stand on your own. But should you be coming into this period feeling more resourced and a little like, come on, maybe you have that gate 36 and you're like, come on, crisis, I can do this. I would look to Blackthorn. And Blackthorn has a really marvelous adaptogen capacity that helps you ride the waves of physical, mental, and emotional stress. And it also has an incredible protective action. The blackthorn plant has probably the longest thorns of any shrub known. So it, really has that back off quality. But this ability to ride the waves is exactly what we need. But if you're clinging to your surfboard and you don't want to look up, maybe Dog Rose would be a better option for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. You use the term clinging a couple times, which is funny because this is part of the hexagram structure of all of these emotional solar plexus gates, which is the fire. Fire is the base, which is the clinging fire in most places, right? Fire needs something to burn on, right? It doesn't just happen in the air, right? And so I think it's interesting, like that the way you've said it makes me think about the nature, the underlying nature of
Mhm.
this emotional fieriness, right? That we hold on to things that we burn on, right? Instead of say allowing things or releasing things or letting them
Mhm.
go, right? Like this is the lesson I think in this solar plexus space.
And I think too, there's the holding of the both and the polarities of life in with this particular gate as well. Like there's is pleasure, there is pain, and that's all part of life. And being able to be with that at the appropriate times, which I guess goes back to resilience, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing folks just, to mention is that on the 18th there is the a new moon, right? It's the new pink moon. It's the final moon of the winter season. And then again on the 20th is the spring equinox, right? So at the end of this space of time, of emotional space and time, there's also this wide opening of newness and initiation and rebirth, right? That's going to happen for everyone. So if you're feeling this, slogging through this emotional space that we've been in for the last, month or so, just hold on to that thought too. That I do think there's going to be an opening up in a way that may feel particularly great this year in some ways.
There's hope. Gee. All right. So we've completed again. So thank you for being with us, and we hope we'll see you next time.